but they weren't taking any action to make things better. These students cited many barriers to action when I talked to them, including fears of being arrested and long-term effects on employment, as well as concerns about upsetting their parents and other people they loved who didn't share their social paradigms. Many of them said they just needed someone to show them how to take action. They lacked leadership in organizing. The research findings were very similar to McAdams' findings 50 years earlier. So I gathered the data and I wrote it up. That's what researchers do. But my home discipline of communication studies, which had its first published piece about social justice in 1996, wasn't quite ready for the conversation I wanted to have. And in 2014, after a few rejections from national and regional journals, I finally settled for putting that barriers essay in a state journal, which was a major disappointment for someone who was trying to achieve tenure. Those state journals were just not going to count. I'm happy to tell you that things have improved in the communication journal landscape from the time I shopped that first piece. Just a few years later, in 2018 and 19, I published related essays in the Journal of Communication Pedagogy and the Journal of Communication Studies with minimal pushback. Since 2020, I've had multiple book chapters, most of them invited, including one where I was asked to capture the entire history of social justice and activism research and communication studies, and to envision the future of the entire discipline. When I was contacted by a major communication scholar to write that historically significant chapter, that's when it dawned on me that I am now considered a leader by my peers in this space. The same person whose first related article was completely rejected less than a decade before. I don't just put my work in academic journals and books, though. I'm very committed to public scholarship and scholar activism and wholeheartedly believe that should be the future of my discipline and the academy in general. So what does public scholarship and scholar activism look like? For me, it means writing opinion editorials for local newspapers and articles for national newsletters, being interviewed on podcasts and similar platforms, giving workshops inside and outside the academy, donating funds, interacting with policymakers, consulting with nonprofit boards, supporting minoritized and marginalized businesses, and yes, taking to the streets when necessary. A unique opportunity for academics is the ability to make people feel seen in our scholarship. For example, in my book that came out in 2019 and in its second edition earlier this year, I wrote erased history back into the pages, including the story of William Dorsey Swann, who was born into enslavement and in 1896 was the first US American to take public action when he reached out to President Grover Cleveland to defend the queer community's right to gather without the threat of criminalization and police brutality. We've all likely heard of the 1969 Stonewall Rebellion in New York City, but it's less likely that you've heard about the demonstrations that happened before at Compton Cafeteria in San Francisco or at Black Cat in Los Angeles. Rebellions like Stonewall don't happen in a vacuum. It's the result of years of fights and frustrations and of feeling unseen and unheard and scared. I've also included the story of Dr. Henry Anonymous in my work, a fellow academic who disguised himself at the 1972 annual conference of the American Psychological Association to ask that his fellow APA members remove homosexuality from a list of mental disorders. That academic, who was gay, risked his medical license by sharing his story, and as a result, kept his identity a secret until 1994, when he revealed that his name was John E. Fryer, a graduate of nearby Vanderbilt University. Here's the deal, though. I haven't always been this person, a person who embraces and advocates for the LGBTQIA+ communities. So here comes the examination part of today's theme. I grew up in rural Oklahoma, influenced by a church that wasn't and still isn't affirming. In college, which was about an hour from my hometown, I had an incredible bestie who eventually became my roommate. His name is Rusty, and I considered him a brother, a soulmate, really. We were super, super close. After we graduated from that university, I moved hundreds of miles away to the University of Iowa to pursue a PhD. I didn't know anyone in Iowa, and I was terrified. So to deal, I loaded up Yahoo Chat because it was 2004, and that's what we did, so that I could keep up with people back home. Not surprisingly, I chatted with Rusty almost every day. In a matter of weeks, he shocked me when he told me through chat that he was gay, something he had known since childhood, but had waited until I was 600 miles away to tell me. I imagine that he waited so that he could feel safe enough to tell me. I responded horribly to his news. I don't want to chance re-traumatizing anyone listening today with what I said, but trust me, it was dismissive and demoralizing. Within a couple of years, Rusty ghosted me for his own mental health, and most of our college friends went with him. That's when I had to stop and rethink everything about myself and what I believed. Looking back now, I categorize that event as the most important turning point in my entire life. Rusty was and is an incredible person. He is kind, patient, and funny. Everybody who knows Rusty loves Rusty. He's one of those guys. I had to ask myself, what is so wrong with me that Rusty can't be around me anymore? It took me years to figure out the answers to that question. And a lot of that contemplation was channeled into my early teaching and scholarship and my current work as an academic affairs administrator. So you can imagine how much those early journal rejections stung when I was just trying to right the wrongs of what I had done. I'm happy to tell you that Rusty and I are friends again, but I missed out on 13 years of his life that we'll never get back, including the death of his beloved grandmother and his wedding ceremony. Rusty's grace has allowed me to feel whole again, and I will never forget the gift of reconciliation that he has allowed and encouraged. I was in Tulsa back in September for the state fair. So that's one of our traditions. And we were having breakfast at a diner on Black Wall Street, another place where reconciliation is sorely needed. Rusty is always so kind to let me process this reconciliation between us, which has been going on for about 4 years now. I asked him that morning at the diner if he was surprised with how I responded to his coming out 18 years earlier. I expected him to tell me yes, and that he was disappointed in me and my response to him. But instead, he told me no, that my response was exactly how he was trained to respond as well. And it is how he responded to himself many years before he finally accepted who he is and worked up the courage to tell me and others that he is gay. He explained to me that he knew that I would need some time to process, and that's partly why he ghosted me. Rusty's ongoing exhibition of bravery, empathy, and compassion are unbelievable and inspire me every day to be a better person. I extend more grace to other people in my life because of Rusty's example to me. Back in the 1970s, Harvey Milk, a San Francisco politician and gay rights activist, implored other gay folks to live openly with their family and friends. He felt that when more people recognized that the people they loved were gay, that the personal would become political. And he was right. It was a long game, but his strategy was right on. And many people believe that's what got us to the Supreme Court marriage decision of 2015. While I appreciate Harvey Milk's advice, I also understand that living openly for some of you may mean dealing with a pre-2006 Amy in your life. It could be your mom, a best friend, a beloved teacher. And I'm sorry about that reality. I wish I could take that away from you. If anyone listening today identifies in the umbrella of LGBTQIA+ and is dealing with a pre-2006 Amy, I want to ask you to not give up hope on her. Continue to live your best life and separate for a while if you need some space. She may need some space too, to become better educated, do some self-reflection, and reprioritize what matters most. If you are a person struggling with the news of someone's sexuality and/or gender identity, I want to encourage you to read the books of Judy Shepard and Sarah Cunningham. Both are mothers who struggled with the initial coming out of their children. Both Judy Shepard and Sarah Cunningham lead foundations today. In fact, Sarah, who like me is from Oklahoma, is the founder of Free Mom Hugs, a wonderful nonprofit organization made up of people who act as surrogate, loving parental figures at Pride and other LGBTQIA-focused functions. If you've already gotten to acceptance and want to focus on an allyship journey, I encourage you to read a recent book by Ruth Coker Burks, a person who has worked in solidarity with AIDS patients in 1980s Arkansas. She is the model of allyship, working humbly and boldly, putting her own life and reputation on the line back when people knew very little about AIDS and referred to it as gay cancer. To this day, Ruth maintains her family cemetery where she buried hundreds of people whose families refused to claim their bodies. I'll end today by affirming the overall theme of the conference, all identities pulling together. If there's one thing I've learned through my scholarship and lived experiences, it's this. The work of direct action, and I include educating people through scholarship, speeches, podcasts, et cetera, as direct action, should be the work of everybody. We must not put it on the people who are marginalized and minoritized to make the world a more equitable and just place. That includes people who fall under the umbrella of LGBTQIA+, how we treat each other and advocate for each other. After all, none of us are free until we're all free. Have a wonderful conference.